I was always under the impression that F1 was a super dangerous sport before I watched it. And don't get me wrong, it is. These dudes are putting their lives on the line to drive a rocket on wheels. I have a special love for the sport, and it's come a super long way with the implementation of safety precautions for the drivers like the Halo system, which I've seen personally save 3 lives in the short time I've been a fan of F1. But before, not so long ago, even the safety measures of F1 racing was pretty lax. Not a lot of safety to speak of, actually. And it's because of that we're here today. With that being said, if you're new here, hi, I'm Crystal. This is Getting Spooky, where we talk about the creepy, weird, and obscure. Today, we're talking about the absolute freak accident of Tom Pryce and Frederik Jansen van Vuuren. I think to start this video, it's important to explain the safety and how it wasn't and how it is now. Back in the day, which was only like in the 60s or 70s, they didn't even have seatbelts. It was widely accepted that F1 drivers drove fast and died on the track. Sir Jackie Stewart, a Scottish F1 driver, pushed hard for seatbelts. He was a hard ass and they called him the Flying Scot. He won the 1971 World Championship while having mono. They didn't even have freaking helmets before 1952, and when they did, they were still shit. In 1966, at the Spa racetrack, which they still race to today, but it's super different now, Jackie ran off the track at 165 miles an hour in a terrible storm. He hit a telephone pole and slammed into the shed of a farmer. He was pinned under the steering wheel and couldn't free himself as gasoline poured into the cockpit, covering him. There was no medical crews, no safety car. Jackie was saved by 2 other drivers who crashed nearby. They pulled him free. They laid him on the back of a pickup truck and kept him on a dirty ground until the ambulance arrived. From then on, Jackie did all he could to implement the simplest of safety, which included, as I mentioned, seatbelts, changes to the track. He was quoted as saying, "If I have any legacy to leave the sport, I hope it'll be seen as the areas of safety, because when I arrived in the Grand Prix, racing so-called precautions and safety measures were diabolical." He pushed for crash barriers to be placed in front of the spectators and the pit walls. Honestly, before any of this, it's a wonder anyone survived the sport and they didn't have more people die. Those were the extent of the F1 changes made in safety until more recently. In 1994, on the Imola racetrack during practice, an Austrian driver, Roland Ratzenberger, died after the front wing of his car broke. The front wing of the car is responsible for downforce, which basically sticks the car to the ground. The term riding on rails describes this. Well, when it broke, this sent his car airborne from the front. He slammed into a concrete wall at a super high speed of 190 miles per hour. Ayrton Senna, 4-time world champion, by then literally commandeered a medical vehicle, rushed to the scene of the crash. Senna was told by the FIA medical chief that he probably shouldn't go on with the race. Senna, of course, said that he couldn't do that. This would be Senna's last race. At the start of the race, Senna held his own against his rival Michael Schumacher, which also had his own fair share of tragedy, but that's a whole other video. After the crash, the safety car deployed. Safety cars to keep drivers at a slow pace while debris and things like that are cleared off of the track. In this instance, the crash that called this safety car shot pieces of car into the stands, injuring 8 people. Well, Senna was impatient and wanted the safety car to go faster. And this is a complaint that drivers still have nowadays. It's like a Ford Focus. Like, it can't go any faster. Well, anyway, safety car's gone, Senna set the pace and rounded turn 7. His car ran a straight line at almost 150 miles an hour into a concrete barrier wall. 2 minutes after crashing, medical was there. Senna was pulled from the car, and it wasn't good. He suffered significant blood loss from his temporal artery, which is pretty important. It actually ruptured. He lost most of his blood already on the side of the track, and he was airlifted to the hospital, where he was pronounced dead. The doctor later said that he knew Senna's fate on the side of the track, as he saw his fixed, dilated pupils and knew that his brain stem had stopped working. The saddest part of this is that Senna had an Austrian flag in his car for when he won the race, ready to honor Roland Ratzenberger and his death earlier that day. He never got to do it. Despite the safety, though, it wasn't perfect. They had a lot of things in place to help after the crash happened, but what they didn't do was have things in place to prevent crashes. In 2014, during a typhoon, they were driving in a typhoon. Jules Bianchi, a 25-year-old driver, wasn't able to slow down enough and slammed into a piece of heavy machinery that was there on the side of the road to remove another driver's car that had crashed earlier. Jules was going so fast that the spectators said that he completely went under the machine and his roll bar was destroyed. Jules was unconscious and not able to be reached by team radio. He was not able to be airlifted because of the weather, so he was transported by ambulance for 32 minutes. Jules suffered for 9 months before succumbing to his injuries from that accident. Despite that, even still to this day, people still get pissed that they call races because of the rain. In 1977, Tom Pryce started his last and final race weekend at the South African Grand Prix. On lap 22, an incident involving another driver, Renzo Zazzori, caused his car to be placed on the side of the road. Renzo Zazzori had pulled off the side because fuel was pouring into his cockpit, and he wasn't able to get free due to his O2 tube being attached to his helmet. Seeing him struggle, 2 marshals ran from the other side of the track to free Zazzori from the tube and put out the fire. The first marshal was a 25-year-old called Bill. The second marshal was a 19-year-old called Frederik Jansen van Vuuren. It's claimed that the policy was that 2 marshals go out, one for backup if the main marshal's fire extinguisher didn't work. But let's be real, there was no real policy, and the race director later said that the marshals crossed the track without permission. Bill made it across the track with no issues. Frederik didn't. At the time Frederik was crossing the track, he was holding a 40-pound fire extinguisher. As Frederik was crossing, the cars of Tom Pryce and Hans Joachim Stuck came over the hill. Drivers tend to follow close to one another to take advantage of something called the slipstream. This helps the driver behind the car move faster with less friction from dirty air. Science. Well, Hans Joachim Stuck saw Frederik crossing the road, so he had the reaction time to move out of the way. Tom Pryce did not. Frederik was hit by Tom Pryce at a speed of 170 miles per hour. Frederik's body was literally turned into mist. He was so badly mutilated by the car that he was thrown several hundred feet in the air and ended up in pieces, yards in front of Zazzori's car. If that wasn't awful enough, the fire extinguisher that Frederik was holding, the 40-pound fire extinguisher, was sent flying. It ended up hitting Tom Pryce in the head with such force, it literally decapitated him in the car. Tom's death was instant, but he was still in the car, driving with his foot on the gas down the main straight, dead. He ended up crashing into a barrier and another driver. The other driver was okay. Frederik's body was so badly mutilated that the only way that they were able to identify him was by calling all of the marshals into a room to see who was missing. There is a video of it. I'm not going to show the video here because YouTube is a pain, but it's not hard to find. It looks exactly as you would imagine it would. Awful as fuck. Like I said earlier in the video, safety's come a long way since then, but it's still not perfect. The implementation of the halo caused quite a stir with drivers who hated the way it looked, complained that it caused vision issues as it obscured their center vision in the car. I've seen the halo save 3 lives that I can think of off the top of my head. The first being a driver who I swear to God I thought I saw die on TV. It was the end of the season, I was in bed, and in America the races are sometimes really early. The cars left the line and I was listening to the start when my husband screams that someone had, and I quote, just died. I got up to see a ball of flames on the side of the road. I had never seen no shit like that before, and it was scary because at the time no one was sure who it was. Then we saw it. The driver jump out of a burning car. It felt like hours he was in there, but it was only seconds. He was alive. And if the halo had not been there, that driver would have no head from driving into the barrier. That driver was Romain Grosjean. Another driver that the halo saved was 8-time world champion Lewis Hamilton. In his beef with Max Verstappen in 2021, the two crashed into one another, and it caused Max Red Bull to drive over Hamilton's Mercedes. If the halo wasn't there and in place, the tire of Max's car would have taken the head clean off of Lewis Hamilton. The final driver, which was also another crazy accident to see, where the halo no doubt saved this man's life, was Chinese driver Zhou Guanyu. In 2022, Zhou Guanyu's car caught air in the first lap of the British Grand Prix. He ended up belly up, skidding across the track until flipping and ending up between the barrier fence and the fan stands. The force of the crash had literally gouged a chunk out of the track where the halo skid, saving the life of Zhou Guanyu. I'm glad that the drivers have come along for this safety ride now, because a lot of famous drivers, world champions even, objected to the halo for all sorts of stuff. But that tune has changed now, and the drivers are their own advocates for their safety. Because if you don't keep the drivers safe, you won't have a sport, and the drivers are the most important. What about y'all? Do you enjoy motorsports? I know I spoke about F1 here, and I know that there was several crashes in other sects of motorsport, F3, NASCAR, MotoGP as well. MotoGP for me is so sad because those drivers are literal babies, young kids, 18, 19 years old. I know people say that they died doing what they love, but still. I'm going to wrap this up here, but not before I say thank you to my most favorite people, Bad Lily Goth, Abby, and Evan. Thank you so much for supporting my channel. I honestly couldn't do it without y'all. And as always, I'm Crystal. This is Getting Spooky, and I'm out.